Welcome back to Infinite Podcast, everybody. Kicking off with something timely. Did you know we celebrate New Year's on January 1st thanks to the Romans? They dedicated it to Janus, god of beginnings. Makes sense, but I'm itching to dive deeper into this ancient party history. Simon, what have you got on those Babylonians and their take on New Year's?
Oh man, the Babylonians, Joe. They went hard. Get this, their New Year's was a whole 11-day festival. I mean, can you imagine partying for almost 2 weeks straight just to welcome the year? And it wasn't just about partying. They made promises to their gods so they could start fresh. Kinda like our New Year's resolutions, but with more divine consequences if they bailed. Pretty wild, huh?
11 days? Our one-night parties suddenly seem like warm-ups.
Heh, makes New Year's Eve look like an appetizer.
Sure, an appetizer, but think about it. Could we sustain the same hype for 11 straight days? Our resolutions barely make it to February as is. Maybe there's something to that Babylonian commitment. We might need a bit of that divine pressure to stick to our gym memberships.
Absolutely not, Joe. 11 days sounds like a marathon. Our one evening of saying goodbye to our diet plans is enough. Adding divine pressure? I'd be doomed. The first day back at the gym would be my last. Those Babylonians must have had some endurance. Me? I'll stick with January 1st and a solid nap on the 2nd.
Yeah, endurance. Reminds me of the first time I tried that day after fitness resolution. Gym was packed, energy through the roof. By day 2, it looked like an abandoned warehouse. Here's my takeaway. Motivation's like fireworks on New Year's, bright at the start, but quickly fades to smoke. Now, imagine if every workout felt like the first day of the year, huh? Maybe those ancients knew the secret after all.
Imagine that, Joe. What if we could bottle that first day energy? We'd be unstoppable. But let's face it, after the New Year bash, our get up and go got up and went. Perhaps those ancient civilizations had it right, turning this into a ritual rather than a wild night. That way, you have 11 days to get used to the idea of new habits. No wonder their promises to the gods stuck. They paced themselves. Modern problems need ancient solutions, maybe?
Pacing. It's that simple, right? Pacing yourself makes the impossible seem doable. Modern life's about this instant change, like flipping a switch on New Year's. But the slow burn, that's how you forge lasting habits. Having an 11-day lead-up might just build up enough steam to keep going. All these quick fixes don't stand a chance against good old-fashioned consistency.
Slow burn is one thing, Joe. But let's be real, 11 days to ramp up or not, asking folks today to stay hyped for that long is like telling a toddler to walk before crawling. It's just backwards. January 1st hits, and people go nuts with the new me stuff. Then poof, vapor. Make it a month-long thing? We'd have gyms turning into ghost towns by week 2. You can't teach an old dog new tricks overnight, or even over 11 nights.
You know, Simon, this whole New Year hype reminds me of my neighbor's dog, Buster. Every year, they get him a new toy on January 1st, and he goes berserk, thrilled to bits. But give it a week. That toy's forgotten under the couch, and he's back to chewing old slippers. Point is, excitement is natural but short-lived. Whether it's Buster or us with our fancy resolutions, without building a real routine around that initial thrill, we're just setting ourselves up for the slipper-chewing equivalent of ditching diets and skipping workouts.
Buster's Toy Saga. Classic. But get this, Joe. Maybe we're looking at it all wrong. It's not about a lack of staying power or getting bored. Consider this. Buster gets the new toy. It's all jazzed up with bells and whistles. A week later, it's been there, chewed that. This is us with resolutions. We grab onto shiny goals without asking if they suit our lifestyle. It's easy to blame our inner Buster, but honestly, wouldn't you ditch a generic squeaky bone for your favorite beat-up slipper? Maybe the problem isn't routine, it's relevance. If annual promises felt as comfy as old slippers, we'd probably stick to them better.
Now that's a thought, Simon, but let me push back on it. Are we really looking for comfort in our resolutions? Because if New Year's is about transformation, then shouldn't we be reaching for that squeaky bone that makes us think twice, challenges us? Comfy old slippers are great, but don't lead to growth. Maybe the point isn't to stick with what's easy. Perhaps it's about daring to swap out the slipper for something that keeps us on our toes. Could it be we just haven't found the right new toy to keep us engaged?
Hey, new listeners. You're riding the waves of Infinite Podcast with Joe and Simon. To catch you up, we've been gabbing about the ancient roots of New Year's celebrations. Picture this. The Romans partied on January 1st for good old Janus, big beginning vibes, and the Babylonians made an 11-day extravaganza out of it, because why not? Now we're debating if our quick-to-quit resolutions could use a hint of that ancient endurance, or maybe just better toys to play with. Stay tuned. We're getting deep into why our New Year's gusto fizzles faster than cheap fireworks.
Hey there, fresh ears, Joe here with my partner in chat, Simon. In case you just tuned in, we're diving into how the Romans kicked things off on January 1st, all thanks to a god named Janus, who was all about beginnings and such. The Babylonians, though, they threw massive 11-day benders for their New Year's. And here's the kicker. We're trying to figure out if ancient dedication beats our modern resolution game, hands down. So stick around, because we've been unboxing this topic like it's the last gift under the tree.
Hey newbies, Simon here. You're smack in the middle of Infinite Podcast's deep dive into New Year's ancient bash. Romans, they kicked it off with god Janus on the 1st of January. Babylonians went hardcore, an 11-day blowout to ring in their year. Meanwhile, Joe and I are hashing out whether we modern folks can learn a thing or two from their hefty commitment versus our flash-in-the-pan resolutions. Stick around. You won't want to miss what comes next.
For sure, Simon. Seasoned partiers claim there's nothing new under the New Year's sun. But these ancients? They were pioneers of party endurance and intention setting. It makes you wonder what other January gems are hidden in the sands of time, waiting to be dusted off and given a modern twist. Could ancient traditions hold the key to making resolutions that actually stick around longer than holiday leftovers? Let's keep this conversation rolling.
You know, Joe, this whole resolution thing got me thinking. What's the deal in our brains that flips when the calendar changes from December 31st to January 1st? It's like, bam! Suddenly we're jazzed to become superheroes overnight. What's up with us wanting to sync life changes with a new page on the calendar? Ever wonder if maybe we're just wired for fresh starts, or if it's all fluff from society dangling that carrot of new year, new you?
You know what, Simon? That reminds me of this one time at band camp. No, I'm just pulling your leg. But seriously, I knew this guy back in college named Rick. Brilliant dude, really, had every gadget known to man. Every semester, Rick swore he'd cut down on tech distractions and study more. What's wild is he rode this roller coaster year after year without fail. Here's the interesting part. Each time he cleaned his slate for a new semester, it lasted maybe a month, if that. Finally, about a year after graduation, I bumped into him, and you wouldn't believe it. He's running his own startup now, thriving. When I asked why it stuck this time, he said, "No magic calendar switch, Joe. Just realized change has to be for me, not because it's September or January." Made me think, maybe that internal click matters more than what society expects when the ball drops.
Rick's story's a gem, but hold up. That internal click thing sounds neat until you're staring at a plate of brownies while trying to eat healthy. I mean, society might wag that New Year's you should finger. But let's face it, without some external pomp and pressure, wouldn't most of us just hit snooze on life? Sure, Rick had an epiphany that revved him up, great for him. But back here in the land of mortals, if we chucked all the calendar hype, I bet my collectible comics' most resolutions would end up like those unread self-help books we all have, collecting dust.
Ah, Simon, you're hitting a nerve with the brownies there. But chew on this. While some need the fireworks to get moving, others run their own race without fanfare. Rick's leap from tech junkie to startup success. No societal cheerleading, just personal grit. It begs the question, do we rely too much on external cues like calendar changes? Maybe it's about conditioning that drive internally, so when push comes to love handle shove, we've got our own backs. Could ditching the resolution ritual lead to more Ricks and less dust collectors? Might just be worth a shot, don't you think?
On the whole personal drive bit, I get it, I do. But imagine if resolutions were like pets. You know, January 1st rolls around and boom, Everyone's adopting these cute little promises to ourselves puppies. Full of excitement, right? But just a few months down the line, and uh-oh, reality's not all wags and licks. Next thing you know, your new puppy's chewing up the furniture and peeing on the carpet. Makes you think twice before taking home that New Year's resolution pup next time, huh?
Cute puppies? More like resolutions are wild hyenas, laughing at us from the savannah of our failures. Look, people adopt these resolution pets thinking they're cute and cuddly change agents, ready to coo and awe their way into a lifetime movie scene. Then boom, reality bites, literally. Your furry promise turns into a beast, tearing through your motivation like cheap tissue paper. And what's left? A cycle of guilt when June swoops in, that hyena's long gone, and you're just staring at next January's pet store window, pondering another go-around. No thanks. Maybe it's time to adopt some good old-fashioned self-discipline instead of that New Year's pup.
Self-discipline over hyenas. You might be onto something, Joe.
Absolutely, Simon. Because at the end of the day, those hyenas, they're just chasing their next meal, you know? And that's basically what these resolutions are. You think it's this thing that'll give you all the answers. But real change, that's hunting bigger game. It's about consistency, not relying on some arbitrary date. Discipline beats motivation every time because it doesn't hinge on feeling good. It's about getting up and grinding even when you don't want to. That's the ticket, man.
Grinding over feeling good, I'm sold. Discipline's the real MVP.
Haha, exactly. Discipline is like that unsung hero, the Mr. Miyagi to our Karate Kid aspirations, teaching you to wax on and wax off when all you want to do is high-kick that New Year resolution into oblivion. Trust me, by December, you'll be catching flies with chopsticks instead of chasing that motivational dragon's tail again.
So, discipline is the quiet ninja, and resolutions are like that friend who says they're just going to have one more slice of pizza. Next thing you know, it's 3 a.m., you're both covered in pepperoni with no pizza left. Whoops!
Resolutions talk big. Discipline quietly finishes the whole pizza box.
Speaking of pizzas, resolutions are basically pre-orders we make each New Year's Eve. There we are, hyped and dreaming. Yeah, I'm going to have a ripped body, read 2 books a week, learn Mandarin. Then the pizza arrives a week later. It's not what you pictured, and suddenly you're like, did I order extra cheese and 0 willpower? Because that's all I'm serving here.
So it's basically, I'll have a side of rock-solid abs with a scoop of fluent Mandarin, hold the extra cheese. But actually, you know what? Throw in that cheese. I'll start Monday or next January. Classic.
Classic indeed, Joe. But let me throw this at you. Aren't we just setting ourselves up for an all-you-can-fail buffet? Year after year, the cycle repeats. Chopsticks ready to pick up Mandarin or a fresh gym membership card, yet come February, chopsticks or drumsticks, and the gym card's lost in the abyss of, I'll start tomorrow. People aren't failing because they lack cheese-resistant superpowers. It's because they're mere mortals trying to stick to superhero scripts. Maybe dialing down from Mandarin to managing not to wear socks with sandals could be the real win here.
Dial back? I'm going to push back, Simon. See, the problem isn't the goals, it's how we're wired to oversize them. If we went small, like learn 5 words in Mandarin or replace 1 soda with water, it wouldn't be a resolution revolution. It'd be evolution. Small victories, my friend. They add up. Chuck the superhero cape and pick up a pedometer. Let's start tallying small steps, not leaping over buildings. That's where the real transformation happens.
Oh, evolution, not revolution. Come on, Joe. Since when did going small ever light a fire under anyone's posteriors? Here's a thought. Tiny goals make tiny ripples. Life's short. If we're aiming anywhere, it should be for the stars, not the streetlights. Sure, you might land in the mud more often than not, but at least you'll have mud in your teeth from reaching high, not from tripping over your sandal straps. Let evolution take care of the inchworms. I say we keep our eyes on the superhero capes.
Hey, listeners just joining in, you've dropped into the middle of our Resolution Revolution chat. We're deep diving into why we make vast New Year's promises that, let's be real, often crumble faster than a cookie in a toddler's grip. Simon's pushing for aiming high with these yearly pledges, grab life by the cape and soar. Meanwhile, I'm saying, maybe those hard-to-reach superhero goals aren't always the way to go. What about starting with small steps? The mud on your teeth ambition versus tripping on easy wins. It's the classic big dream versus small victories debate. Stick around as we keep tossing this topic back and forth.
Wrapping this up, Joe, the whole big versus small resolution debate, it's like choosing between a superhero blockbuster or an indie flick. Sure, the blockbuster is flashy, but those indie wins have depth. Now let's leave that cookie in the dust and ask our listeners, what's your take? Are you capes and flights or picking up those smaller fights? Where do you stand on the resolution revolution?
You know, Simon, talking about resolutions and revolutions, it makes you think about all the variety in how people approach the new year. Speaking of which, have you heard about some of the bizarre ways folks around the globe are kicking off their year? Like in Spain, where they stuff their mouths with grapes at midnight, one for each bell strike. Imagine banking your whole year on not choking on fruit, or the Danes who toss plates at friends' doors. Hope that brings good luck, and not just a feud with the neighbors.
Nothing screams Happy New Year like dental bills from crunching grapes, huh, Joe? And the Danes, yeah, bet their resolution is be a better aim. But hey, let's not just chuckle about grapes and plates. Some folks leap into the new year, literally. In Panama, they burn effigies of well-known people to shoo away the bad vibes. Here's an idea. Instead of resolutions, we burn little dolls of our bad habits. Bye-bye sock with sandals effigy.
Oh man, can you imagine? Our backyards would look like a bad habit bonfire, one effigy for every time we hit snooze on our 5 a.m. gym alarm. And hey, watch out, voodoo doll makers. There's a new gig in town. Just picture it. Make your own mini-me's to torch at midnight. What are you burning this year, Joe? This little guy who ate pizza 3 nights a week. May he rest in greasy peace. But honestly, these traditions might be bizarre, but they sure beat the same old song and countdown. I'm all for starting the year with some creative sparks, figuratively speaking, of course.
Gotta love a New Year's grease fire. Bring on the weird.
Absolutely. And you know what? Some of these traditions get even weirder. In Colombia, people carry empty suitcases around the block for good travel luck, which is perfect for us when we're late sprinting to the airport with actually packed luggage. Or Estonians eat 7 times on New Year's Day to ensure abundance. They must have killer gyms there. Oh, and in Scotland, the first person who crosses your threshold after midnight should bring a gift for good luck. It's called first footing. If they show up empty-handed, it's probably not the best omen for the year, huh?
Ha, guess my gym's next-door neighbor is out of luck.
Better start lifting pies instead of weights, Simon.
So who's gonna be your first footer this year, Joe? Got any friends in mind, or are we taking volunteers from the grape-eating, plate-smashing crowd?
Simon, my ideal first footer would be someone who can walk in with a dumbbell in one hand and takeout menus in the other. Balance, right? But realistically, it'll probably be you, tripping over with microphone cables, recording our next wild episode. And if you're not carrying snacks, consider yourself uninvited from 2024.
Noted. I'll bring the snacks and extra cables, Joe.
This reminds me of that time when I was invited to a New Year's Eve party at the last minute. I arrived there and realized it was a themed event. Everyone had to show up holding something bizarre as their contribution to the night. Talk about being caught off guard. So I rushed to the nearest open shop, but all I could get my hands on was a pack of cardboard coasters. I walk in, painfully aware of my unimpressive offering among the piñatas and sparklers. But then, the host gets this idea. We all write our resolutions on these coasters, right? We end up flinging these things, frisbee style at midnight, shouting out our goals. By some twist of fate, my basic coasters turned into the highlight of that bash. A simple, silly, yet unexpectedly meaningful tradition was born. It's amazing how these impromptu moments can stick with you for years and align perfectly with global New Year traditions. Who knew coasters could join the ranks of grapes and suitcase walks?
Coasters to commemorate chaos. Accidental genius, Joe.
Exactly, Simon. Sometimes the best traditions are unplanned.
Unplanned? More like serendipitous, Joe. But come on, let's up the ante. Think about it. We could start a trend where people toss coasters with bad habits into a fire pit, I mean, why limit ourselves to resolutions? Let's watch those suckers burn and say, see ya, to 'em in style. Imagine ditching late night snacking in flames while your friends cheer on. That's one hot way to ensure you stick to your goals, or at least have a laugh trying.
Burning bad habits on coasters. Now that's a tradition I'd pay to see. What do you think, folks? Ready to throw your vice into the fire and start fresh? It's funny how these quirky traditions make the new year not just about new beginnings, but also about shared laughter and camaraderie. Who knows what other wacky customs are out there? What are some that you've heard about or would like to start?
You know, Joe, all this talk about hurling resolutions and torching bad habits, it's like we're trying to predict a better year for ourselves, isn't it? Like our own little way of fortune telling. That's nothing new, though. Across the globe, folks have always had some wild ways of predicting what's coming next.
Oh, absolutely. Take the ancient Romans with their augurs interpreting the will of the gods from the behavior of birds. Talk about a bird's eye view of the future. Or those fortune cookies. With fortune so vague, you'll believe anything that happens was predicted. Sure makes me wonder how much these prophecies are just us seeing what we want to see in the chaos of life. Can we actually dictate our futures, or are we just along for the ride? Let's be real here. If I could predict the future, I'd be living on my private island, not arguing over whose turn it is to bring snacks to the podcast studio, right?
So, Joe, do you think we actually have a say in shaping our fate? Or are we just rolling with the punches that the universe throws at us?
Well, Simon, if history has taught us anything, it's that people love to believe they've got the steering wheel when it comes to destiny. Yet, every year shows us that life loves throwing curveballs that no one saw coming. Look at those doomsday predictions. We're still here despite countless end-of-the-world scenarios. Does that mean we're nailing our fate shaping? Doubtful. We make plans, set goals, but the universe has its own agenda. In the end, we're pretty much improvising our dance routine to whatever tune reality decides to play. So, bring on the prophecies, but I'm keeping my day job and not betting the farm on what a crystal ball says.
Ah, Joe, so you're telling me not to take those psychic predictions and horoscopes to heart, huh? Imagine if we could predict every win and loss. Wouldn't that suck the fun right out of life? What's the point of a surprise party if you see it coming a mile away? But let's spice this up. Why don't we make our own zany, infinite podcast prophecy for next year? Let's say, everyone will adopt pet rocks again, because why not? We're throwing it back old school. Watch out, world. 2023 is rockin' in some very literal ways.
Pet rocks, eh? Simon, we might have to disagree there. Sure, pet rocks making a comeback would be hilarious, but if we're going to make a wild, infinite podcast prophecy, let's up the stakes. I'm thinking this year everyone suddenly gets serious about learning a new language. Why? Because apparently, in our fabricated future, there's an intergalactic meeting, and you don't want to be the only one nodding along, not understanding intergalactic basic. So folks, start brushing up on those language skills. Earth's counting on you. Oh, and spoiler alert, the meeting's potluck style, so bring your best dish.
Oh, intergalactic chit-chat and cosmic potluck? Watch out, my grandma's casserole is about to go universal. But real talk, Joe, I barely manage ordering from the taco truck down the street. So if ET expects me to roll up speaking space Spanish while whipping up moon muffins, we're all in for a wild ride. Beam me up, Scotty. I've got some studying to do, bro.
Well, Simon, diving into the historical side of predictions, many cultures had their own twists on prophecy. Think about the Mayans with their complex calendars that freaked everyone out in 2012, or the oracle at Delphi, where ancient Greeks sought insights wrapped in riddles. Fast forward to Nostradamus. His quatrains are still getting the conspiracy theorists buzzing each new year. But space Spanish aside, humanity has always tried decoding the future, using everything from astrology to zodiac signs to tarot cards. The funny thing is, despite advancements in science and technology, people still eat this stuff up around New Year's because, let's face it, uncertainty's scary, and we love a roadmap, even if it's written in the stars or served with a side of Grandma's cosmic casserole.
Oh, the Mayans with their calendars. You remember 2012, Joe, right? Everyone stocked up on canned food and built bunkers. And what happened? We all ended up with enough beans to last a lifetime, but nowhere exciting to go. I guess when you play the game of prophecies, you win or you know what? Actually, you just end up with too many beans. Period.
Spot on, Simon. In 2012, we all braced for Armageddon and ended up with an unintentional bean hoarding competition. But isn't that just the perfect metaphor for prophecies? You prepare for one thing, and life gives you another, often something completely mundane. Year after year, predictions come and go. Some are surprisingly on point, while others miss by a mile. When those ancient cultures looked up at the stars or deep into their rituals, seeking insights about the year ahead, they weren't just forecasting weather or harvests. They were trying to inch closer to certainty in an uncertain world, crafting tales and expectations about what was yet unseen. So when we glance back through history, it's this funny blend of jaw-dropping accuracy at times and comical errors at others. It's not just about the misses or hits, though. It's how these predictions have influenced decisions, sparked movements, or simply made folks stockpile beans. It goes to show, whether it's written in stone tablets or trending hashtags, humanity's fascination with prediction is more about grappling with the unknown than the actual foresight itself. Keep your beans handy, everyone, but don't forget to enjoy the surprises along the way.
Haha, beans and bunker parties. Humanity, the eternal fortune cookie cracker.
Absolutely, Simon. Everyone's looking for their lucky numbers.
But hey, don't you think it's kind of wild how despite all our tech, people still lean on the stars and old school prophecies to score some cosmic insider info? We're over here with gadgets that can find a street anywhere in the world, but many still rely on age-old rituals when New Year's rolls around. I guess there's comfort in tradition, or maybe just hoping we'll hit bingo with our future guesses. If nothing else, it keeps things interesting. So, what's your prediction for next year, Joe? Aliens bringing back disco?
Simon, it's a wild ride, isn't it? We've got all this tech at our fingertips, yet when push comes to shove, we're throwing salt over our shoulders and reading horoscopes. I think it all boils down to wanting some magic in the machine, a bit of mystique in the mundane. And frankly, who wouldn't want to see aliens reviving disco? But let's not forget that these traditions keep our feet on the ground while we reach for the stars. Makes you wonder what other old-school predictions are just waiting to be rediscovered or reimagined by the next generation, right?
You're right, Joe. Traditions and rediscovery go hand in hand with how we evolve. Speaking of evolving, think about the locks on our doors. It's a journey from wooden beams to Wi-Fi-enabled security cams. It's like we went from using a twig to keep a door shut to needing fingerprints for a snack run. What a trip through time that is, huh?
Oh, Simon, we've been unlocking the history of locks on today's episode. For those just tuning in, we started with ancient wooden beam locks, then marveled at how the Egyptians leveled up security with their pin locks. Romans threw some wards into the mix for extra protection. Later on, locksmith legends like Joseph Bramah and Linus Yale Jr. stepped onto the scene, revolutionizing the game with their lock designs. We've gone from metal keys to key cards and now to biometrics, fingerprints, retina scans, you name it. It's truly fascinating how our need to keep stuff safe has pushed us from basic bolts to tech-ed-out fortresses. Makes losing your keys a relic of the past, doesn't it? So stick around as we continue to explore this journey of jiggles and clicks, the evolution of keeping everything under lock and key.
Evolution of security, eh? It's nuts to think we went from oops, left the wooden beam off the door, to crap, I forgot my password again. And let's be real, the whole facial recognition thing is cool until you're trying to unlock your phone with a mouthful of sandwich. Not pretty. Plus, ever noticed how old keys had character? They were like mini metal sculptures. Now we've got these sterile key cards and apps. Sure, they're efficient, but where's the charm? There's something about turning a real key that just feels right. What's next, Joe? Eyeball scans just to raid the fridge at midnight?
Simon, you hit a funny bone there. Eyeball scans for the fridge. Imagine midnight snacking turning into a full Mission Impossible scenario. But charm aside, let's not gloss over how those bygone big metal keys weren't just about looks. They were a status symbol, something to flaunt. while now we hide codes and carry fobs that tell no tales. You're right about character, though. Modern security may be slick, but it lacks that tactile history. You don't feel the stories behind sterile tech like you do with an ornate key. However, I'll push back on one thing. As nostalgic as they are, old keys aren't exactly hacker-proof. Our digital locks might face different threats, but at least they're constantly evolving, getting smarter, and keeping our sandwich-eating, facial recognition fumbling selves secure in this weird world of ours. Don't get too attached to current tech. Who knows? Next, we might just need a good old-fashioned handshake to open a vault. Keep tuning in as we pick apart more of these mind-bending evolutions in everyday life.
For those just joining in, we've been twisting through the history of locks faster than a locksmith picks a tumbler. From ancient wood to Egyptian marvels and onto the high-tech fingerprint and retina scanners of today, it's like a treasure hunt through time. We've chatted about how locks not only kept our stuff safe, but showed off our bling with big ol' keys, all the way to the spy movie-worthy security we have now that is keeping us on our toes, if not always our eyeballs. Stick around. You never know what door will unlock next on this wild ride through the vaults of time.
Man, that's wild. We go way back with security, like ancient locks all the way to biometrics, and it's just a part of our DNA now. People always want to protect their stuff, no matter the era. We've gone from simple mechanics to super advanced tech. Makes you think, what's next? Brainwave identification? One thing's for sure, we're never standing still. It's constantly changing, constantly getting more complicated. Just do me a favor. No retina scans on my fridge. I need access 24/7.
No retina scans on the fridge, got it. But brainwave identification? Don't give them ideas, Joe, or I'll be locked out of my snack stash for thinking about calories instead of the code. Imagine that. Sorry, your brain is still on a diet. Access denied. Gotta love progress.
Haha, that's one way to enforce a diet, Simon. But you know, brainwave IDs aren't as sci-fi as they sound. Even now, our tech is getting intimate with our personal makeup. Thinking of you, smartwatches tracking every heartbeat. But will it make security foolproof? Doubtful. For every high-tech solution, some low-tech problems persist, like forgetting our gadgets or them running out of battery. And let's not forget hacking. The more complex the system, the more intricate the breaches. Convenience comes at a price, my friend. The real kicker, though, no matter how advanced locks get, someone always leaves the back window open. Some things never change. Keeps locksmiths and thieves in business. Am I right? Let's keep turning the dial on this lock talk. Who's up for exploring the weirdest security measures from history? I bet there are some doozies hidden in the annals of time.
Backup plan. Trained guard pigeons. Beats a password any day.
Simon, I've got a perfect story that ties in. Back in college, I landed a summer job at a historical museum with the most antiquated security system you could imagine. Now, we didn't have trained guard pigeons, though that would have been something, but we had this rickety old lock on the back door. It was one of those iron behemoths you'd see on medieval castles, and it came with a key that was more like a small shovel than anything else. One evening, I was last to leave, and guess what? The ancient lock decided to play dead. No amount of jiggling or coaxing would get it to turn. So there I was, stranded inside a building full of history but zero modern conveniences. You'd think being surrounded by all these relics of security through the ages would give me some inspiration. But nope. In the end, I climbed out a window and jogged around to lock the door from the outside. The kicker? The security guard who'd rely on good old video surveillance missed my grand escape because he was, wait for it, feeding the pigeons. Guess sometimes the simplest solutions or distractions are the best ones after all.
Joe, that's a story worthy of its own lock legend. Feeding pigeons while you're stuck performing acrobatics out the window, that's museum security for you, a mix of old school and oops. That giant key must have felt like wielding Excalibur without the magic. Who knew the evolution of locks could lead to a cardio session? You've just got to wonder what other tales are locked away in history's chest. Maybe some locksmith from ye olden days had their own pigeon escape route? Guess we'll never know, but it sure is fun to imagine the mishaps and mayhem throughout the ages over something as simple as keeping the door shut. What do you think lies hidden behind those ancient locks, Joe? The stories those old mechanisms could tell.
Speaking of history's locked away tales, Simon, it reminds me of those so-called unpickable locks. You know the type. The lockmakers would throw out a challenge to any who could crack their perfect creation. Like Jeremiah Chubb's famous 1818 invention. He was so sure no one could pick it. Imagine standing there with your unpickable lock while some rogue cracks it open. There goes your street cred. Even today, we see companies making bold claims about security. But as we've seen time and again, someone always figures out a way in. High-profile breaches aren't just setbacks. They're lessons in humility for creators and a one-up for criminals. It's this constant cat-and-mouse game that I'm betting also keeps pushing tech further. Does knowing that somewhere, somehow, all locks may be pickable, does that freak you out, Simon? Or does it drive that urge to invent something better?
Unpickable? Joe, honestly, that term is like catnip to lockpickers. Dangling an unpickable lock in front of them is asking for trouble, like leaving a pie on the windowsill and wondering why it vanished. And yeah, Chubb's lock was a tech marvel back then, but come on, claiming something is unpickable is like waving a red flag at a bull. It's just begging someone to prove you wrong. Sure, high security breaches are serious stuff, but do they freak me out? Nah, it's too much fun watching boffins run around patting their wares only to see some crafty soul pop it open with a paperclip. It keeps everyone on their toes. Inventors get to tinker with their next big thing, while the rest of us get a good story and maybe a bit of schadenfreude. Unpickable? More like, try me.
Sure thing, Simon. Those try-me marketing ploys are more than just hype. When Chubb's lock got picked, it wasn't just about the thrill, it was a pivotal moment in security history. You see, locks and keys have been evolving for centuries based on these high-stakes challenges. Each time a lock is deemed unpickable, it raises the bar for what we think is possible in security tech. Remember Harry Houdini? Before his escape artist days, he was a locksmith and knew a ton about picking traditional locks. His insight contributed to many design improvements. Big claims like Chubb's essentially set up public contests that tested the limits of mechanical ingenuity and drove advancements. Fast forward to today, and the term security has exploded beyond metal and mechanisms. We've entered the era of encryption, biometrics, multi-factor authentication, secure, sure, but as history shows us, not immune to human cunning or technological innovation. Every infamous breach, from Brinks-Mat robbery in '83 to the Stuxnet cyber attack, underscores this lesson. Absolute security is a myth, and with each crack in the armor comes a renewed push to create something stronger. So despite the PR risk, those bold claims are a catalytic part of progress, scientific, psychological, and cultural. They keep the narrative of safety dynamic, don't they?
Absolute security a myth? Now that keeps the locks turning.
You bet, Simon. Betting on absolute security is like expecting your socks to stay paired up in the laundry. It's a nice dream, but you'll always end up with the Lone Rangers. In the world of locks, there's no perfect pair either. For every so-called unpickable lock, there's someone out there ready to sock it to him with their picking skills.
Lone Ranger lockpickers, the unsung heroes of humility.
Absolutely, those Lone Rangers are crucial. They test our assumptions about security. My take? No lock is truly pick-proof. It's just a temporary state until someone with the right mix of skills and persistence comes along. Call it humility, call it the circle of innovation, but this unending challenge between lockmakers and lockbreakers drives progress. We expect too much by branding anything as unpickable. It's a bold claim that history has time and again proven to be flawed. It stirs up the pot and gets everyone thinking. We need that kind of ambition and the reality checks that follow. Keeps us moving forward.
Locks are a challenge, not a guarantee. Keeps life spicy.
Spoken like a true lover of life's puzzles, Simon.
Ha, true lover? More of a lock skeptic, Joe. I'd trust a squirrel with my lunch before I trust an unpickable lock. At least then, the break-in would be cute and furry.
Forget unpickable locks. I want what squirrels have, natural smarts and agility. Plus, if they forget their stash, they just plant some trees. What does a pick lock give us? Headaches and paperwork.
Right, who wouldn't want to be a squirrel? But Joe, let's not glorify these fluffy-tailed thieves. Sure, they're cute, but maybe the only reason squirrels haven't picked a lock is because they don't have thumbs. Give them opposable thumbs, and I bet we'd need a squirrel-proof lock on the market. And as for us humans, love it or hate it, without those lock-picking headaches, challenges, where would we be in our quest for better security? Probably still using wooden latches like medieval serfs, eh?
Funny you mentioned squirrels, Simon. Reminds me of growing up with my granddad's old shed in the backyard. He had this ancient rusted lock on it, claimed it was the Fort Knox of locks back in his heyday, completely tamper-proof. Well, nature had other plans. A family of clever raccoons made short work of his impenetrable fortress. Every night they'd somehow undo the latch and help themselves to his stash of birdseed and fishing gear. Granddad was floored but inspired by their crafty persistence. He took to inventing his own contraptions to outwit them, always testing, refining, rejigging. The critters kept him on his toes. He never did create the perfect raccoon-proof lock, but man, did he come close. It's like with those unpickable locks. We keep striving for impenetrability, but sometimes it's the push from those unexpected intruders or obstacles that fosters the most creativity and leads to new innovations. It's not about proving we're infallible. It's about rising to the challenge and improving each time.
Raccoons, the masked bandits of suburbia. Granddad's Fort Knox lock taunting them must have been like a brain-teaser puzzle toy. They loved the challenge. Except no treat pops out when you solve Granddad's gadgetry. But let me jab at this a bit. Just because those raccoons got in, does that automatically mean all locks could be seen as mere child's play for any critter or crook with enough time on their hands? Some folks might say your granddad needed to step up his game, maybe get some consultation from a real locksmith. When you think about it, a good back and forth between lock creators and lock pickers, or raccoons, invents not just better locks, but better thieves too. So, is the goal really to make something unpickable, or is it just to keep the game interesting by seeing how far we can push the envelope before someone licks the stamp?
Well, as much as spirit of rivalry pushes boundaries, Simon, it's less about the end game of an unpickable lock and more about that back and forth. It fuels innovation on both sides, never really ending. It does make you wonder, can we ever hit that sweet spot where security measure and sheer ingenuity find balance? Or is it just a never-ending loop of one-upmanship?
Speaking of one-upmanship, the quest for security has had its fair share of comedies, hasn't it? The stories where cutting-edge tech meets human blunder are priceless. Like there was this burglar who tried to outsmart a smart home device. Picture this. Our thief breaks in and starts rummaging around. Suddenly, the smart device chimes in, "Welcome back, Robert. Shall I put on your evening jazz playlist?" And the burglar, caught off guard, goes, yes, thank you." So he's standing there, in the dark, with soft jazz playing in the background, totally confused about his next move. Or those tales of folks locking themselves out of their houses or cars. High-tech alarms going off because of a cat. What's your most hilarious encounter with locks and security gone awry, Joe? And hey, listeners, jump into this vault of laughs and send us your best or worst security fails.
Oh, Simon, the image of a burglar getting serenaded by accidental jazz is peak comedy. But if we're talking about security fails, there's that classic doozy where burglars dig through walls to avoid alarm systems, only to pop out in full view of a security camera. Mugshots made easy. And then you've got those state-of-the-art biometric systems that refuse entry because of a slightly sweaty finger. Seen it happen. A guy locked out of his office post-lunchtime jog faced a scanner, as if begging it, "Please, just let me work." Human error mixed with ambitious tech often writes the best punchlines. What do our listeners think? Ever been outwitted by your own fortress of solitude? Come on, folks. Hit us with your funniest lock or security mishap stories. And don't spare any embarrassing details. The more cringeworthy, the better for all our amusement.
Oh man, I can just picture that fellow pressing his face against the scanner. Pure desperation. Did he ever get back into his office, or did he have to jog home for help?
Yeah, He got back in eventually, Simon, but it took a visit from the tech crew and multiple failed attempts before the system recognized him, probably thought he was trying to steal his own identity. It's like these high-tech gadgets want you to prove your worthiness. It's not enough that you buy them, you've got to perform some kind of ritual dance for access. Definitely gave everyone in the office a solid laugh, and maybe a few ideas for an updated fitness regime. The punchline? Security is as good as its weakest link, which turns out, quite often, to be us. Folks at home, what's your best, I'm smarter than my security system, oh wait, no I'm not moment? Share it with us. We promise to only laugh with you, not at you.
So Joe, did this guy learn his lesson and change his after-jog routine, or is he on first-name terms with the tech crew now?
Oh, the poor guy definitely switched up his game, started carrying a handkerchief just to dry off before touching anything too smart for its own good. And yes, he's pretty much part of the tech crew family now. They've got him on speed dial labeled sweaty security situation. A bit of humility and humor goes a long way in living with our ever-watchful electronic guardians.
Ha ha ha, sweaty security situation. That's gold. So Joe, did they tweak the system after that to handle a bit of post-workout gloss, or is the handkerchief still his best bet?
Handkerchief's still king. Tech has its limits, Simon.
Still king, huh? Does the company hand out branded sweat towels now as part of their onboarding kit?
They should, right? But instead, they updated the protocol. New hires get a Tech Meets Flesh, a manual. It's half troubleshooting guide, half workout tips to stay dry. Wish I were joking, but hey, in the land of locks and security, sometimes the key is knowing you'll never be fully prepared for what's on the other side of the door.
That's one way to stay fit for security's sake.
Absolutely, Simon. Just imagine security meetings starting with jumping jacks. Got to keep those fingerprints non-slip. A world where the strongest lock is your own grip post push-ups. It's all sweat and secure now.
Sweat and secure. Love it. Now there's a lesson. Be fit or you're locked out. But hey, to all our listeners flexing those security muscles, we've got to hear your tales of tech tangles and sweat-induced lockouts. Share your stories. We're all ears for the next episode. Keep those fingerprints dry and spirits high until then.
You know, Simon, that brings us to a pretty interesting crossroads. Think about it. Lockpicking is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? On one side, you've got locksmiths using their skills to save the day when we find ourselves on the wrong side of a door. But then there's that shady image of a crook with a crowbar. What's your stance on this, Simon? Is lockpicking just a tool for burglars, or are we looking at something that genuinely pushes security tech forward?
Lockpicking, Joe? Nah, it's not just cat burglar gear. It's also a sport now, like capture the flag for lock enthusiasts. But let's get real. Calling out the locksmiths every time you leave your keys on the kitchen counter isn't ideal. And that's where knowing a bit of lockpicking doesn't hurt. Plus, think about those researchers who pick apart security flaws to make things safer. Keeping them secret? That's like pretending the monster under your bed will vanish if you just close your eyes. No dice. We need eyes wide open, daylight on problems to fix them. What do people want more? Feel-good ignorance, or the sometimes uncomfortable truth?
I hear you on lockpicking as a skill, Simon. But there's something about handing out skeleton keys for the sake of sport that doesn't sit right with me. Where do we draw the line? Sure, researchers do need to dig into flaws to fortify security, but does publicly airing your dirty laundry not also tip off the bad guys? Besides, there's this whole obsession with creating impenetrable locks, which seems more like fear-mongering. It's pushing us toward a world where trust is just an old-school concept, not the foundation of community it used to be. Do we really want to live in Fort Knox replicas because we've hyped up the paranoia? Maybe it's time for a reality check on what we're guarding so fiercely. Is our culture of locked doors breeding better security, or just better criminals?
Joe, you're spot on about stirring the paranoia pot. Let's get real. It's almost like we're competing to fear our neighbors more than we trust them. Sure, creating beefier locks feels like a win, but it's kinda like taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. We should focus less on turning homes into mini prisons, and maybe, just maybe, invest some of that lock loot into community building. And that culture of locked doors, man, at this rate, we'll start locking our locks. Are we trying to keep folks out or trap ourselves in? I mean, can't we hit a sweet spot between security buff and community stuff? What happened to the good old it takes a village vibe?
I get where you're coming from, Simon. But consider this. The world's changed, and nostalgia for village vibes doesn't cut it anymore. High security measures aren't about distrust, they reflect reality. It's not always about paranoia, it's about practicality in urban jungles where anonymity dominates. The stronger locks serve a purpose, protecting us from very real threats that didn't exist when "it takes a village" was coined. Plus, consider valuable assets. Sensitive data. Without robust security, we're sitting ducks. Can we really fault folks for feeling safer with state-of-the-art locks when headlines scream daily about break-ins and data theft? I'm all for community, but let's not downplay the need for solid security in today's world.
Sure, the world's changed, but hear me out, Joe. Isn't it funny how we're more connected than ever with this web of tech, yet we're throwing up walls like they're going out of style? Urban jungle or not, the best security system has eyes, human ones. We can't forget that behind every state-of-the-art lock is a person craving community. And yes, the headlines are screaming, but so's our basic need to trust and be trusted. Build too many barriers, and we might just forget how to live without them. You know, maybe we need locks smart enough to remind us when to come together, instead of driving us apart. Just imagine Simon's communal locks, securing your home and uniting your community. Now there's an untapped market.
Well, Simon, that's quite the utopian gadget you've got there. But here's a thought. Can locks really teach us to trust? See, even your revolutionary communal locks need to close at some point. The truth is, we don't just build barriers for fun. They're a response to risks that are all too real. The ethical dilemmas in security? They aren't going anywhere. Every new lock is a challenge to crack, and publishing security flaws can be as risky as it is noble. It's a cat-and-mouse game where each side ups the ante. Does the path to better security lie through exposure or secrecy? That's the million-dollar question. And about surveillance, we've got to ask, is Big Brother watching because we want him to, or because we let him? Sure makes you wonder if there's any key left that'll unlock our sense of privacy without leaving us vulnerable.
Joe, with all these high-tech locks and surveillance talk, I'm starting to think our smartphones are the only things not plotting against us. Well, at least until the next update, right? It's like our phones are the only ones that haven't gone over to the dark side. But give it time, they'll probably start judging us for our poor choice in pizza toppings next.
Oh, Simon, wait until the next OS update. Introducing Pizza Sense. Your phone now unlocks only with a nutritionist-approved topping combo. Say goodbye to extra cheese and hello to kale, because nothing says secure like holding the line on both digital privacy and your waistline.
Ha! Pizza Sense. Now that's security for you, locking out the pepperoni pirates of the world. But honestly, folks, these tech leaps and ethical bounces keep us on our toes. It's a big old can of worms, or should I say jar of jalapenos? What do you think? Should we be leaving digital keys under the mat, or are we one step away from a pepperoni password pandemic? The lines are blurred between safe and smothered. Tell us, where do you draw it?
You know, speaking of pizza toppings and digital security, it makes you think about the old school tricks that still beat out tech. Take dogs, for instance. Nothing high-tech about them, right? But their sniffers are like organic super gadgets. I read somewhere that scent detection dogs have noses that make our strongest security measures look like child's play. They're picking up scents we can't even begin to comprehend with our machines.
Oh yeah, Joe. Scent detection dogs? They're basically the superheroes of the smell world. Their noses have up to 300 million olfactory receptors. Us humans, just a measly 6 million. They can sniff out anything from missing people buried in snow to tiny traces of digital devices hidden by criminals. It's wild what they can do. These pups are trained for intense situations using their powerful schnozzes. They can even pick up on medical conditions like cancer or diabetes just by whiffing it out. And tech? The fanciest machines we've got can't hold a candle to that canine prowess. They serve in law enforcement, medicine, disaster response, you name it. We could build robots till the cows come home and still not match one furry four-legged sniffer unit on their worst day.
Absolutely, dogs' sniffing abilities make our best tech look primitive.
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, these dogs are detecting a speck of a scent in a swimming pool. Imagine tech trying to do that. It'd probably just short circuit. And the training for these dogs? It's not just fetching and rolling over. It's specialized stuff tailored to their sniffing talents, like tracking down missing hikers or sniffing out a hard drive during a raid. We put chips on everything, slap on biometric locks, but when push comes to shove, we still look at Fido and say, buddy, we need your nose. Because when you've got millions of years of evolution versus some gadget from last year, my money's on nature every time.
Nature's tech triumphs. No gadget can beat a dog's nose.
Oh, no contest there. It's all in their biology. Dogs have this special organ called the vomeronasal organ, also known as Jacobson's organ, right? This thing detects pheromones, which are beyond our tech's scope. That's not even counting those 300 million smell receptors. Our best artificial noses, like electronic scent detectors, maybe pack a few dozen sensors and they still miss the subtleties. Dogs can pick up on a trace scent in parts per trillion. For them, it's like detecting one rotten apple in 2 million barrels. And because of that, they're amazing at jobs like sniffing out narcotics, explosives, or missing persons. Their training is rigorous too. Positive reinforcement techniques mold puppies into professional sniffers. From day one, their potential is honed with scent games that slowly escalate based on their success. Find the toy, get the treat, find the bomb, save lives. With an accuracy rate that beats machines by miles, these dogs are critical in security, healthcare, disaster recovery. They're heroes without the capes.
Tech's good, but a dog's nose? Unbeatable in the real world.
Right, Joe. Hard to beat the real nose deal with a sniffer gadget. But think about this. What about when we can't risk our furry friends, like sniffing out explosives in a danger zone or toxic chemical leaks? There's got to be a point where the risk to the dog isn't worth it, and we have to let machines take one for the team. I mean, we build robots and drones specifically to go places humans and animals can't or shouldn't go. Plus, these metal sniffers don't get tired or need snacks and belly rubs. Sure, no tech yet rivals a dog's olfaction ace card, but there are situations where you don't want even the best doggo on the front lines, right? It's something to chew on, besides your shoe.
Simon, you've got a point about not putting dogs in danger, but here's the rub. Those robotic sniffers still don't compare. They handle the grunt work, sure, but they lack a dog's finesse. A machine gets a whiff of TNT and it's just ones and zeros, no nuance. And you say robots don't get tired? True, but they lack judgment. A dog knows when something's off. Sure, we're keeping Fido out of harm's way, but there are countless scenarios where only that wet nose will do. Robots have their place, no doubt, but when you need the nose know-how, the fur's gonna fly every time. Granted, tech is advancing, but until a machine can beat a dog in a sniff-off, I'm not convinced. And yeah, robots don't need snacks, but those belly rubs are morale boosters for everyone.
Oh, sure, Joe. Robots reading ones and zeros isn't the same as Rover rocking his wet whiskers on the front lines. But let's flip this kibble for a second. What about doggy burnout? You can't just reboot a pooch when they're stressed or scared. Sure, their sniffing superiority isn't in question, but pushing these pups into every high-stakes scenario because they have super snouts, that's rough. We've got to balance it, right? We can't always say, let's unleash the hounds. Sometimes we should be like, nah, let's power up the bot. Because yes, belly rubs are awesome, but not every situation calls for canine charisma over cold, hard circuits. Plus, I think a robot would totally appreciate a belly rub, given the chance.
Simon, I hear you on the doggy burnout. No one wants a stressed-out pup. But here's another bite. Working dogs are bred for this. It's in their DNA to work, and they thrive on it. The key is responsible handling, knowing when your dog is hitting its limits. That's where tech falls short. It has no instincts, no drive. And about those risky situations, well-handled detection dogs with protective gear can sometimes be safer than sending in bots that might miss something. A keen nose beats a burnt circuit board when sniffing out danger. Sure, balance is crucial, but let's not sideline canine capabilities just because we're afraid they might get their paws dirty. They're part of the pack for a reason.
Bread for it, sure, but who's saving the saver, huh?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? These dogs save lives, but they need protecting too. It's not just about gear and gadgets to keep them safe. It's about proper training, knowing their stress signals, and giving them rest.
Absolutely. Protecting these four-legged heroes is crucial. We've got gear and smarts, but the best tech isn't worth a wagging tail if our pooch pals aren't treated right. They're not just tools, they're partners. And good partners watch each other's backs, whether it's covered in fur or not. It's all about striking that balance between tapping into their natural talents and keeping those tails wagging safely. Makes you wonder, what else are we just starting to scratch the surface of with these incredible canine capabilities, huh?
Speaking of scratching the surface, Simon, for all the incredible feats these sniffing superheroes accomplish, they do have their off days. I mean, it's not all serious business. They've got a funny bone, or should I say a funny nose? Like this one time.
Oh, Joe, let me tell you, the sniffer squad isn't always on point. Handlers have shared some priceless bloopers, like the time a top-notch police dog was in training, and instead of cornering the suspect's scent, he beelined to a picnic and face-planted into a sandwich. So much for bagging the bad guys. It was all about bagging that ham and cheese. Or that one hyper-focused hound who interrupted an official search because he dug up someone's buried stash of, wait for it, cat toys. Imagine this tough canine unit proudly trotting back, squeaky mouse in mouth, thinking he's the cat's meow. Cop buddies probably never let him live that one down. These pooches may have a nose for trouble, but sometimes they just end up sniffing out the party.
Sniffing out lunch and toys, career change to party planner.
A party planner. Ha! Yeah, but not every dog's cut out for that gig. Like this one narcotics dog who got a tad too enthusiastic and let a bust on a toddler's birthday cake. Yeah, turned out the suspicious powder was just some spilled baking soda from mom's last-minute frosting fix. Picture it, officers ready to swoop in, and there's Fido with his snout covered in icing. Busted. Or how about search and rescue dogs that find everything except what they're supposed to? This one pooch was sent out to track a lost hiker, comes back hours later with a shoe, a completely different shoe. Wrong size, wrong trail, wrong everything. Dog's like, look at me nailing it, while the trainer's face-palming hard. It's like when you send your buddy for groceries and he comes back with everything but the shopping list. Classic.
Ha! Those stories are golden, Simon. But let's not forget the dogs that take Find It a bit too literally. There was this one incident in an airport where a sniffer dog was on duty to suss out illegal substances, right? Instead, the pup zeroes in on a traveler's suitcase and starts going bananas. The security is on edge until they open the luggage and out pops a bunch of sausage links smuggled from overseas. The culprit? A past-their-prime salami stash, not exactly the drugs they expected. You've got officers cracking up, the passenger turning bright red, and the dog looking like he just uncovered the crime of the century. Sure makes for a memorable trip, and proof that while these dogs have mad skills, they can't resist a good snack. Shows we've all got our weaknesses. Theirs just happened to be delicious.
Whoops, looks like someone didn't follow the instructions carefully. Let's try that again. These furry fiascos really highlight the whole work hard, play hard philosophy, don't they? If anything, these misfires make for some tail-wagging good stories. And hey, at least the dogs are having a ball.